The cardboard sign was too small for the weight it carried. Selling toys to buy medicine for Mom. Two boys stood at the edge of Romare Bearden Park in uptown Charlotte, the late spring breeze tugging gently at their oversized hoodies. They looked 10, maybe younger, identical except for the scuffed sneakers one wore and the stitched patch on the other's jacket sleeve. Grant Whitaker saw them by accident. He was supposed to be across the street at a conference hall, schmoozing venture capitalists and tech journalists. But he had taken the long route from the parking deck, preferring the open air to staged conversations about market trends. The hum of Charlotte's corporate core buzzed in the background. People in suits, earbuds in, heading somewhere important. And then the boys. One of them held out a toy airplane. It was red, chipped at the wings but clean, polished even. The other boy glanced up as Grant slowed, his voice practiced but soft. "Sir, would you like to buy it? It still flies." Grant stopped walking. He didn't speak right away. His gaze dropped to the toy, then to their sign. The cardboard had a child's handwriting, crooked letters, some smudged by what looked like rain or tears. The boy holding the plane added, "Our mom's sick. We need money for her medicine." A flash of irritation rose in Grant's chest, not at them, but at the way the world still managed to blindside him. He'd just come from an email congratulating him on doubling quarterly revenue. Yet here were two children in the shadow of a bank building, begging strangers for enough to survive. He cleared his throat, his voice stiff. "How much are you asking?" The boy blinked. "Anything, whatever helps." Grant reached for his wallet and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. He hesitated, then added another. "Take this." Both boys stared at the money, eyes wide. "Thank you," the other whispered, the one who had remained silent until now. His voice cracked slightly. "What's your name?" Grant asked. "I'm Eli. This is Micah." "Your mom, is she okay?" "She will be," Eli said, with a conviction that didn't quite reach his eyes. Grant nodded once, handed over the bills, and accepted the toy plane. Its paint was worn smooth on the edges. Someone had loved this. They smiled at him, small, tired smiles, and turned back toward the apartments beyond the park. Grant watched them go, the second boy slipping the money into his pocket like it was made of glass. He looked down at the plane in his hand. It was light, plastic, simple, but something about it stuck. He should have turned around, headed back toward his obligations. He even started walking, but 5 steps in, he stopped again. Why did it feel like he'd just witnessed something he wasn't supposed to see? Helen's voice buzzed through his phone when he called. "The pitch is in 20 minutes. You're not at the hall? Push it back." There was a pause. "Sir?" "Cancel the afternoon." "Everything?" "Yes." He hung up before she could ask more. 15 minutes later, Grant sat behind the wheel of his car, the boys' figures growing smaller in the distance. He trailed them from just far enough not to draw notice. It wasn't planned. It wasn't rational. But there was something, some thread, pulling at him. They turned off Mint Street, cutting through side alleys and crossing streets without looking. Not wild, just practiced. The kind of navigation kids learn when they walk alone a lot. Finally, they slipped into an old complex off a side road. Stucco peeling, screen doors swinging. The mailbox cluster was rusted through in spots. Grant parked across the street and watched. A woman stood near the stairwell. Elderly. Wearing a faded robe and slippers, with rollers still in her hair. She leaned on a cane and waved at the boys. They ran to her, spoke quickly. The old woman's face creased with concern. She nodded and opened her apartment door. The boys didn't go in. They headed upstairs. So this is home. Grant stepped out of the car, the toy airplane still in his hand. It felt strange walking into a place so far from the marble and steel world he knew. A kid on a bike zipped past. Somewhere a dog barked, then a door slammed. The air smelled like fried food, faint mildew, and rain that hadn't come yet. The old woman was still at her door, watching. "You don't belong here," she said before he spoke. Not rudely, just plainly. "I met Eli and Micah downtown," he said. "They sold me this." He held up the toy. Her expression softened. "You followed them?" "I wanted to make sure they got home safe." The woman studied him, then sighed. "Maya's not well. Been getting worse the last few weeks. She don't ask for help, but the boys? They try. Lord knows they do." "Is she alone?" "No family nearby. I'm Dolores Kemp, live downstairs. Been helping when I can." He nodded. "I'm Grant." "You some kind of businessman?" If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thoughts matter to me either way. Something like that. She stepped back into her apartment, leaving the door open. "You'd better come up." The stairwell creaked under his feet. Peeling paint, a stain that spread across the ceiling like a cloud. He knocked gently at the second-floor door. Eli opened it. His eyes widened. "You followed us?" "I wanted to return this," Grant said, holding out the plane. Micah appeared behind him, silent again. "I have no bad intentions," Grant said. "Is your mom here?" "She's asleep," Eli said. "She sleeps a lot now." Grant looked past him. A small living room, faded curtains, a folding table with only 2 chairs, and at the far end, through the cracked door of the bedroom, a figure lying on a mattress. Maya. Even from where he stood, she looked too pale, her arm draped limply over her side. A bottle of over-the-counter pills lay nearby, half empty. There was no sound of breathing from the room, only stillness. Grant didn't ask permission. He moved to the doorway, then stopped just short. "She needs a doctor," he said quietly. We don't have—" "I'll take care of it." Eli looked up at him, eyes wide. "Why are you helping us?" Grant crouched down slowly to their level. "Because someone should have helped me once, and they didn't." There was a pause. Then Eli whispered, "Will she be okay?" Grant nodded, not because he knew, but because he couldn't bear to say otherwise. "She will be," he said. "Let's get her the help she needs." The toy airplane sat on the edge of the couch as Grant dialed the hospital. He looked at it again and felt a quiet shiver move through him. He came to the park to escape a meeting, but somehow he'd walked into a story that might change all of their lives. The ambulance pulled away in a hush of sirens and spinning lights. Grant stood at the curb, watching the vehicle disappear through the rows of uneven rooftops. The boys were on either side of him, Eli biting his lip, Micah silent, fingers clenched into the hem of his hoodie. The street was still, like it was holding its breath. "You two ride with me," Grant said. "We'll follow her." Neither of them moved. He knelt slightly, leveling his voice. "It's okay. You won't be alone. I promise." Micah blinked up at him. "Are they going to let her stay at the hospital this time? Last time they said she wasn't sick enough." "They'll let her stay," Grant said. "Not this time, not again." Inside his car, the boys sat in the back seat, too quiet, too still. Grant glanced in the rearview mirror as they pulled away, but neither boy looked up. The toy airplane rested between them, wings catching the soft glow of the dashboard lights. At Atrium Medical Center, Grant didn't ask. He stepped out, opened the passenger door for the twins, and walked them in like they were his own. The ER buzzed with soft beeping monitors and clipped voices. Nurses moved fast, but Grant moved faster. He walked up to the intake desk, not waiting in line. "The paramedics just brought in a woman, Maya Jensen. I need to make sure she's being seen immediately." The nurse looked up, cautious. "Are you family?" Grant opened his wallet. "I'm responsible for her care. Whatever it costs, run it through me." The nurse blinked at the two crisp black cards. "Insurance or—" "Both," he said. "Use the corporate line for the room deposit." She picked up the phone, nodding, and within seconds a sliding door buzzed open. A nurse appeared, gesturing them through. A woman stood just inside the hallway, tablet in hand, eyes narrowing slightly. "You're the one who came in with the twins." Her tone was clipped, professional but guarded. "I am. I'm Tina Alvarez, Social Services Liaison." Grant extended a hand. "Grant Whitaker." Her eyebrow lifted. "The tech guy?" He didn't smile. "The man who's staying until I know their mother's being treated." Tina glanced at the boys. "And your relationship to the family?" "Currently undefined." That got a small twitch of her mouth, half amusement, half suspicion. "Right. You should wait in the family area. I'll come get you once she's stabilized." They sat in a quiet corridor under low lights, the room humming with machines and hushed footsteps. Micah had curled into the chair beside Eli, head on his brother's shoulder. Grant leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, fingers steepled, eyes fixed on the floor tiles. "You know," Tina's voice came an hour later, low but pointed, "this is not usually how these stories go." He looked up. "A man like you," she said, arms crossed, standing at the doorway, "shows up with two kids who aren't his, offers to pay out of pocket for their mom's emergency care. You don't see that. You see people walking away." "I tried," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "For years I tried walking away." She watched him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then softer. "She's resting now. Mild dehydration, but more serious complications underneath. She'll need testing. Probably dialysis. It's chronic." Grant nodded. "Let's get her what she needs." "You can't pay the disease away," she added, not unkindly. He met her eyes. "Number. But I can stop her from fighting it alone." Tina turned and walked back down the hallway. Eli stirred beside him. "Is she going to be okay?" Grant exhaled, slowly. "She's in the right place now." "Do we have to go back home tonight?" Micah asked, rubbing his eyes. Grant looked at them, then at the vending machines flickering in the distance. The thought of sending them back to that apartment, dark, cold, quiet, felt wrong, empty. "No," he said. "You'll come with me, just for tonight." The boys exchanged a glance. "Your house is big, huh?" Eli asked. Grant paused, then nodded. "Too big." They left the hospital just after 1 a.m. The city felt deserted, emptied out under streetlights and stars. As they turned into Myers Park, the trees hung low over winding lanes. The mansion loomed into view. Clean lines, glass accents, gates that opened without a sound. Micah's breath caught. "Whoa!" Grant pulled into the circular drive and parked. The boys stepped out slowly, necks craning upward. "You live here?" Eli asked. Grant didn't answer right away. He was staring at the door, its polished wood, the way the porch light cast long shadows. It looked the same as always, and yet something felt different. "Not really," he said softly. "I just sleep here." The foyer lit up as they stepped inside, motion sensors kicking on. The house was silent, too silent. Grant's shoes echoed faintly on the marble floors. "You got a piano?" Micah whispered, peeking into a formal room. "And a giant dining table," Eli added, running a hand along the smooth edge. Grant motioned down the hallway. "Come on, I'll show you the guest rooms." The rooms were spotless, linen untouched. Art on the walls no one had ever looked at twice. The twins changed into oversized t-shirts Grant found in the laundry room, soft, too big, but warm. "Is this what hotel rooms are like?" Micah asked as he climbed into the bed. "Better," Eli said. "No one yells or slams the walls." Grant froze for a beat, then turned off the light. "Get some rest." He left the door open a crack and walked back into the hallway. Down at the far end of the corridor stood a door. It hadn't been opened in nearly 5 years. He approached slowly, pressed his hand to the wood. Inside, everything remained untouched. Jonah's bed, his telescope, a space shuttle model, drawings of planets taped to the wall. Grant didn't turn the knob. Not yet. He sat in his study instead, the lights dim, the house breathing around him. The boys' soft laughter drifted faintly down the hallway as they whispered about the size of the bathtub and the snacks in the kitchen. He smiled. Just a little. Then his phone buzzed. Tina Alvarez. Voicemail. He played it. I checked Maya's chart again. It's going to be a long road. She'll need a home to recover in, not a hospital bed. Pause. I don't know what you're doing, Mr. Whitaker, but if you're serious, truly serious, you might be exactly what this family's been praying for. He looked down at the toy airplane on the coffee table, turned it slowly in his hand. He didn't know where this was going. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel completely lost. The morning sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, casting gold across the polished floors of Grant's kitchen. It was quiet, too quiet. No clatter, no voices, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional chirp from beyond the tall windows. He sipped his coffee slowly, letting the silence settle. For a moment he forgot there were 2 boys asleep down the hall. Forgotten how, last night, the house had finally sounded different, like something was waking up again. The calm broke with soft footsteps and a startled yelp. "Micah!" Eli's voice came sharp and hushed from the hallway. Grant stood and met them halfway. The boys were in matching t-shirts that hung to their knees, hair sticking up in wild angles. Eli held a half-unwrapped granola bar. Micah rubbed one eye, the other focused on a towering glass vase near the entryway. "I didn't mean to," he said, already on the edge of panic. "I was trying to see if the water was real." The vase leaned, just slightly, but enough. Grant reached out and caught it before it tipped completely. He steadied it with both hands, heart still from the unexpected motion. Micah's face flushed with shame. "I'm sorry." "It's all right," Grant said, steadying both the vase and the boy's voice. "Nothing broke." Eli frowned at his brother. "You always touch stuff." "I just wanted to see—" Grant held up a hand. "It's okay, really." Micah blinked at him. "You're not mad?" "No," he said gently. "Some things are just things." Micah looked confused. "But my mom gets real upset when stuff breaks. She says we can't replace anything." Grant nodded, the words sinking deep. "That's true for some things, but not this." He crouched slightly. "Come on, let's eat something that doesn't come from a vending machine." The kitchen felt warmer with them in it, like color was returning to the edges of a black and white photo. Mrs. Winters, the longtime housekeeper, arrived mid-breakfast and froze when she saw 2 unfamiliar children at the table. "Oh," she said, blinking. "I didn't realize you had guests." Grant stood, already anticipating the questions. "They're staying for a few days. Their mother's recovering. She's at Atrium." She arched a brow. "Friends of yours?" "Not exactly," he said. "But they need a place right now." Mrs. Winters looked at the boys, who both straightened like soldiers. Then her expression softened. "I'll make up the upstairs suite," she said. "And maybe we'll do pancakes tomorrow. Boys that thin need more than toast." As she walked off, Micah leaned close to Eli and whispered, "She's nicer than she looks." "I heard that," Mrs. Winters called without turning. Later that afternoon, Grant returned to the hospital. The boys stayed behind under Mrs. Winters' reluctant watch. He promised to be back before dinner. Maya's room was small, quiet. The machines around her beeped in slow, steady rhythm. She was awake but pale, her face drawn, her body thinned out by exhaustion. She looked up as he entered, her voice a soft rasp. "You're the man from the park." "I am." "You followed my boys." "I did. People don't usually follow us for good reasons." He approached slowly. "I bought a toy airplane." Maya blinked, lips curling faintly into a weak smile. "Eli's favorite. He didn't want to sell it." "He didn't," Grant said. "But he did anyway, because you mattered more." Maya looked away, her eyes glinting in the low light. "They shouldn't have to do that," she whispered. "Sell pieces of their childhood for me." "They shouldn't," he agreed. "But they did. And they did it with hope." She looked back at him. Really looked. "Why are you here?" "I saw something I couldn't ignore. 2 boys with more courage than most grown men I know." "That's not an answer." He exhaled slowly. "I've been alone for a long time. I thought I liked it that way. Then your sons handed me a piece of plastic and somehow it cracked open something I thought was sealed shut." Maya studied him, unsure. "They're staying at my house," he added. "Just until you're well." Her eyes widened. "You took them home with you?" "I didn't want them going back to that apartment alone." Her voice sharpened. "You don't know us." "You're right, but I want to." Maya looked at the ceiling, then back at him. "You some kind of savior complex, Mr. Whitaker, Grant Whitaker." That name made her pause. "Wait, the Grant Whitaker? Smart homes? Top 40 under 40? You're that guy?" "I used to be," he said. "Now I'm just a man sitting in a hospital room trying to figure out what this is." Maya's breath hitched. "I don't need charity. This isn't charity. Then what is it?" Grant took a step closer. "Maybe it's 2 people who've both lost more than they care to admit, realizing they don't have to carry it alone." She didn't answer, but something shifted in her face. Not trust. Not yet. But the tiniest crack in the wall. He placed the toy airplane gently on the table beside her. "They're good kids," she whispered. "I know," he said. "They're not the only ones." He left before she could say more. Back at the house, the boys were building a fort with couch cushions and dining room chairs. Mrs. Winters sat nearby, pretending to read while watching every move. "Your mom's awake," Grant said as he walked in. Both boys jumped up. "Can we go see her?" "Tomorrow," he said. "She needs rest tonight." "Is she okay?" "She will be." Micah tugged at his sleeve. "Did you tell her about the airplane?" "I did." "What did she say?" Grant looked at them both, then knelt. "She said you're brave." And she's right. That night, as the house settled into quiet again, Grant stood outside the locked room. The door remained closed, but his hand lingered on the doorknob longer than before. Down the hall he heard the boys giggling in their room, the kind of laughter that only comes from feeling safe, even for a night. He didn't open the door, but he didn't walk away either. The morning after Maya's voice cracked the silence of a hospital room, the world moved differently for Grant. The boys were still asleep, curled up in oversized blankets, limbs tangled like puppies in a pile. He didn't wake them. He let the house stay quiet just a little longer, making his coffee in silence, standing at the kitchen window as early light poured through the magnolia trees. He hadn't been in this kind of rhythm for years, caring about someone else's morning, adjusting to someone else's presence. And it hadn't even been 2 full days. But already the house felt fuller. He exhaled, slow and steady, then turned, startled to find Helen standing in the foyer, her coat still clinging to the rain that had begun to fall outside. "You canceled 3 meetings," she said, her voice cool, clipped. "The investors are asking questions." "I'll deal with it," he replied, pouring her a cup before she could ask. "Would you like me to tell them why you're suddenly playing foster dad in a 7-bedroom mansion?" He looked up sharply. Helen raised a brow, not unkindly. "They're not my words, Grant. Just what people are saying. He handed her the cup. Let them talk. She studied him for a beat, then nodded once. So, is this about Jonah? He paused, the sound of his son's name still catching somewhere behind his ribs. No, he said quietly, it's not. This is something else. She didn't press. Helen never did. But as she walked off, he could feel the weight of her eyes on his back. Curious, cautious, concerned. By noon, the boys were wide awake and bouncing down the hallway, giggling as they raced to the kitchen. Mrs. Winters had set out cereal and orange slices, muttering something about how they were eating her out of house and home. Can we go see Mom today? Eli asked, halfway through his second bowl. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thoughts matter to me either way. Grant nodded. After lunch, we'll bring her some things from the apartment. Micah's face lit up. Can we bring her sketchbook? She always draws when she's sad. We'll find it, Grant said. Whatever you want to take to her. The apartment was colder than Grant remembered. Dolores Kemp was waiting, keys in hand, cardigan draped over her shoulders like a shield. She's a good woman, she said, watching the boys run up the stairs ahead of them. Been through too much alone. Most folks don't look twice. I didn't come to rescue anyone, Grant interrupted softly. No, she said, giving him a long look. You came because something inside you needed rescuing too. He didn't respond. He couldn't. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of vanilla and dust. The twins scattered, grabbing items, drawings, a small blanket, a photo of Maya smiling at a picnic table. In the bedroom, Grant paused at the edge of the mattress, the sheets still rumpled, the indentation of her body still visible. He spotted a notebook on the nightstand. Sketches filled the pages, portraits, flowers, abstract shapes that curled like smoke. On one page, Maya had drawn the boys asleep on the couch, Micah's head resting on Eli's shoulder. She had written something in the corner. Some days I draw them just to remember why I keep going. His throat tightened. At the hospital, Maya was sitting upright, though her skin was still too pale. Her hair was tied back loosely, her eyes shadowed but clear. She looked stronger, but tired, like someone who'd been fighting for too long. When the boys entered, she smiled wide enough to make Grant look away. Mom! Micah practically flew to her side. Eli followed, careful with the bag. We brought your stuff and your notebook. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she took it. Thank you, baby. They hugged her carefully, as if afraid they'd break her. Grant waited near the doorway, giving them their moment. When Maya finally looked at him, her expression softened just slightly. You're back. I said I would be. You don't seem like the kind of man who makes promises. He met her eyes. I wasn't. Maybe I'm trying to be now. She looked down at the sketchbook. It's a lot letting someone in this far. I'm not here for pity, he said. I didn't think you were. Silence stretched between them, until Eli broke it. Mr. Grant let us sleep in beds with 12 pillows. 12. Each Maya smiled, touching his cheek. I hope you said thank you. Like 3 times, Micah chimed in. Maya looked at Grant again, her voice gentler. Thank you for taking care of them. I'm not trying to replace anything, he said quietly. Just trying not to turn away this time. She studied him a moment longer, then nodded. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. They both looked away at the same time. Tina Alvarez appeared in the hallway, clipboard in hand. Sorry to interrupt. Maya, we need to go over your treatment options. Grant, could I have a word? Outside the room, Tina's tone changed. You're getting involved, she said. Deeper than just bills and rides. I know. Do you understand what this could mean? For them? For her? Yes. She looked him over. I've worked in this hospital for 16 years. I've seen people with good intentions burn out fast. Don't be another man who gives hope and then leaves when it's no longer convenient. I'm not leaving. She didn't blink. Then don't flinch when it gets real. Grant said nothing, but the words clung to him like rain. Back at the house, the boys talked nonstop, about how Maya looked better, about her smile, about the nurse who gave them extra cookies. Grant listened, offering nods and hums. That night he found himself standing outside the locked door again. This time he held the key. He didn't turn it, but for the first time his hand stopped trembling. The rain came slow that morning, steady and soft, tracing lines down the wide kitchen windows like a lullaby. It made the house feel quieter than usual, so quiet that even the ticking of the antique wall clock felt louder than necessary. Grant stood at the counter, fingers wrapped around a mug of black coffee that had long since gone cold. He hadn't slept much. Not because the house was noisy, it wasn't, but because the quiet now carried weight. It wasn't empty anymore. It was expectant. Eli entered first, barefoot, hair sticking out in every direction, hoodie sleeves swallowing his hands. He rubbed one eye and paused when he saw Grant. You always get up this early? Only when I have things to think about. Eli slid into a bar stool. That must be all the time. Grant almost smiled. Lately, yeah. Micah joined them a few moments later, carrying a cereal box nearly the size of his torso. We're not going to school today, right? No, Grant said. It's Saturday. Micah sighed in relief. Good, 'cause your house is too big to explore in one day. They poured cereal into bowls and talked in half-awake voices about hidden rooms and staircases that didn't make sense. Grant listened, every now and then offering a quiet reply or a raised eyebrow. Then the front door chimed. Mrs. Winters appeared from the hallway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. I'll get it. Grant nodded, but curiosity tugged at him. When she returned, her expression was tight, uncertain. You have a visitor. He frowned. Who? But before she could answer, a familiar voice echoed through the hall. I hope I'm not intruding. Maya stood just beyond the entryway, holding a small bouquet of grocery store flowers, the plastic wrap damp from the rain. Her face was pale, her shoulders thinner, but she stood on her own. No nurse, no wheelchair. Just her. The twins nearly knocked over their cereal racing to her. Mom! Micah reached her first, hugging her waist. Eli hugged from the other side, careful but tight. Maya bent to them, pulling them in as close as her strength allowed. I missed you both so much. You walked all the way up here? Eli asked, awed. Mrs. Kemp insisted I take her neighbor's car. I'm borrowing it for a few days. She looked up at Grant. I needed to see them. I hope that's all right. Of course it is, he said. She walked inside slowly, taking in the high ceilings, the art on the walls, the spotless floor. This place, she murmured, it's like stepping into a magazine. It's a house, Grant said. That's all. Maya glanced at him, head tilted. A house is never just a house. They sat in the sunroom, the storm tapping gently against the glass. The boys pulled pillows onto the floor, playing cards while the adults talked above them. Maya watched them for a long moment, then turned to Grant. They haven't laughed like that in weeks. They've been good guests. They've never been guests anywhere before. He looked at her, really looked. She had lines under her eyes now, new ones. But her voice had strength again, and her posture was straighter. You look better, he said. I'm still tired all the time. The doctor says that's normal, but I'm eating, sleeping, trying. You don't have to try alone. She leaned back. That's the part I don't know how to accept. I've spent so long keeping it together by myself. I'm not sure how to let someone else step in without feeling like I've failed. You haven't failed. It doesn't feel that way at 3 a.m., when my kids are asleep and I'm wondering if I'm going to make it to the end of the month. Her voice wasn't bitter, just honest. Grant nodded slowly. I know what it feels like to go to bed with questions you don't have answers for. What were your questions? He paused. Could I have done something differently? Should I have noticed sooner? Was one bad day enough to undo everything I'd spent years building? She watched him, still, quiet. Grief, he said finally, doesn't always show up as tears. Sometimes it's just silence that never leaves. Maya looked down at her hands. Your son. He nodded once. Jonah. She didn't press. The moment stretched. Too fragile to touch, too honest to ignore. Micah popped up suddenly. Mom, can we show you the library? Mr. Grant has a telescope. Maya smiled, grateful for the interruption. Sure, baby. Show me everything. The boys took her by the hands and led her down the hallway. Grant followed at a distance, watching as she stopped at each door, each framed picture. When they reached the library, she let out a soft gasp. This is your library? She asked. It's mostly for decoration, Grant admitted, but the telescope's real. She walked toward the tall window where the instrument stood. Rain speckled the glass, blurring the garden view. Jonah used to love stars, he said quietly, stepping beside her. He had books, models, glow-in-the-dark constellations on his ceiling. Maya looked up at him. Do you come in here much? Not really. Why? Too many things I tried to forget live in this house. She turned toward him. And what about now? He met her gaze. Now, I'm starting to think forgetting was never the answer. The twins sat cross-legged on the rug, arguing playfully over which planet was the coolest. Maya's hand rested lightly on the windowsill, fingers brushing the edge of the telescope. You're giving them something I couldn't, she said softly. Stability. Safety. They've given me something too. She tilted her head. What's that? Sound. Her brows drew in. Sound? He looked back at the boys. Laughter in the morning, running feet on the stairs, someone asking me where the apples are. Maya smiled gently. You miss being a dad. I never stopped being one, he said. I just stopped having someone to call me that. She didn't say anything, but her eyes shimmered slightly, even as she turned back to the glass. You're welcome to stay, he added, his voice softer now. For as long as you need. The room upstairs is ready, and so is the house. Maya looked at him, her voice barely audible. It's a big step. So take a small one, he said. Stay for dinner. She looked around the room again, at the boys, at the warmth. Then she nodded. Dinner. That I can do. That night, for the first time in years, the formal dining room echoed with forks, with stories, with laughter that felt real. And when Grant caught Maya looking at him, just briefly, just enough, he realized something had shifted. Not everything had to be earned with pain. Some things could be chosen. And maybe, just maybe, this was one of them. Morning light slid in like a whisper, spilling gold over the polished floors of the hallway. Somewhere in the house, dishes clinked softly. The smell of cinnamon drifted through the air. Maya stood barefoot in the doorway of the guest suite, one hand on the doorframe, as if anchoring herself before stepping into a world she still wasn't sure she belonged to. The house was quiet, but not empty. She could hear laughter faintly, childish, real. She followed the sound to the kitchen, where the boys were seated at the counter, Mrs. Winters placing plates in front of them with all the authority of a woman who'd seen and done it all. You're early, the older woman said without looking up. I couldn't sleep. Good. You'll like the pancakes better hot. Maya hesitated. Mrs. Winters finally turned, softening. "Sit down, honey. You're here now." She slid into a chair, her eyes scanning the space. It still felt unreal. The gleaming tile, the oversized appliances, the curated warmth of a life that wasn't hers. The boys looked at ease here, too at ease, like they were adjusting faster than she was. Grant walked in moments later, tie half done, coffee in hand. His eyes met hers briefly, and something passed between them. Acknowledgement, maybe. A silent, "good morning," that said more than words. "You look more awake than I feel," he said, settling across from her. "Hospital lighting isn't exactly restful." He nodded. "I've always thought recovery doesn't really start until you're home." Maya glanced down at her plate. "Is this home?" He didn't answer right away. "It could be," he said, "if you want it to be." The words were simple, but they landed like a stone in her chest. Heavy, real, hopeful, dangerous. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not. I mean it, Grant. I'm trying to stay grounded." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table. "Then tell me what you need. Tell me what grounded looks like for you." "I need stability. For them. A routine. A way to stand on my own 2 feet again. I can help with that." "And when you're done helping?" she asked, her voice low. "What then?" That stopped him. She watched his jaw tighten, his eyes flicker just enough to betray the question he hadn't dared answer for himself. "You think I'll disappear?" he said. "I think people have a way of stepping back once the emergency ends." He looked at her carefully, then at the boys. "Then, maybe I'm still figuring out where this begins." Later that day, while the boys played in the backyard, Maya wandered the upstairs hallway alone. The house stretched in every direction. Too many doors. Too much space. She paused at one in particular, different from the others. Closed. Locked. Her hand hovered over the knob before she pulled away. Downstairs, Mrs. Winters was folding towels in the laundry room when Maya entered. "Was that Jonah's room?" Maya asked gently. The older woman didn't look up. "Yes." "I thought so." Mrs. Winters paused, then placed the towel down. "Grant hasn't gone in there since the funeral. Not once." Maya leaned against the wall. "He keeps it locked. He keeps himself locked, too." The older woman stepped closer, eyes sharp but kind. "You're good for them boys. And maybe you're what he needs to remember that the world's still turning. I'm just trying to catch my breath. You take your time, but don't mistake his silence for indifference. That man cares deeper than most. He just forgot how to show it." That evening, they all had dinner together again. The table was filled with conversation. Micah telling a story about discovering a secret stairwell. Eli insisting it was just a closet. Grant laughed, a low, steady sound that made Maya glance over at him more than once. She hadn't seen him laugh like that before. After the boys went to bed, Maya stayed behind to help clean up. They stood at the sink side by side, washing dishes that didn't need to be washed by hand, but felt better that way. Grant handed her a plate. "You're settling in." "I'm trying. It's strange. I don't know if I feel grateful or scared. Both can be true." She placed the dish gently in the rack. "You built all of this life. And I've spent years trying to keep my head above water. I don't want to feel like I'm swimming in someone else's pool." "You're not," he said. "You're just learning how to float again." She looked at him, her eyes soft but searching. "And what about you? What about me? Are you floating or drowning?" He didn't answer at first, then, "I was sinking. But the thing about kids is, they make noise, they splash around, they grab your hand whether you ask them to or not." "And me?" He turned toward her, their hands brushing slightly as they reached for the same dish. "You remind me that not everything broken stays that way." Maya blinked, eyes lowering. She turned off the faucet, drying her hands slowly. The tension in the air shifted, gentle but charged. Not romantic yet, but unmistakably intimate. She stepped away, heart pounding harder than it should have. "Good night, Grant." "Good night, Maya." He watched her leave the kitchen, her figure disappearing into the quiet of the house. And for a long moment he stood there, not ready to move, not ready to let go of the silence that somehow didn't feel so heavy anymore. The sun had barely crested over the trees when Grant heard the thud of small feet above him. It was becoming routine, the twins rising with a mission, fueled by dreams and more cereal than he thought a pantry could hold. But this morning, the energy in the house felt different, charged, almost eager. Downstairs, the smell of pancakes drifted through the air. Not Mrs. Winter's usual crisp-edged stacks, but a softer, sweeter kind. Cinnamon, brown sugar, maple, homemade. He walked into the kitchen and stopped. Maya stood at the stove, wearing a faded flannel shirt over leggings, her hair tied up in a loose knot. She was humming quietly to herself, flipping a pancake with casual grace. The boys were already seated at the counter, hands clasped in exaggerated patience, grinning. "She won't let us touch anything," Micah announced. "Says she's got secrets." Maya glanced over her shoulder. "You give a woman one morning in a proper kitchen and she turns into a tyrant." Grant smiled, leaning against the doorway. "I was warned." She flipped another pancake, then nodded toward the coffee machine. "Your fancy contraption makes something drinkable." "Barely." "I'll let the engineers know." She glanced at him again, and he caught it. That flicker of something unspoken. Something that had started the night before, still hanging in the air like a string neither of them was ready to pull. Breakfast passed with laughter, sticky fingers, and syrup on elbows. The boys argued over whether a pancake with chocolate chips counted as dessert or breakfast. Maya stood at the sink afterward, rinsing plates, humming again. Grant found himself standing beside her before he even realized he'd moved. "You're dangerous," he said, watching her work. She raised an eyebrow. "Because I cooked breakfast?" "Because you made it feel like Saturday mornings are supposed to." She paused, setting the plate down gently. "I haven't had one of those in a long time." There was silence. Not awkward, just thick with thought. "I was thinking," she said slowly, "maybe I could start doing some light work again. Not full-time, just easing back in." Grant nodded. "Do you have something in mind?" "I know a nurse at the community clinic. They're always short-staffed. I could help with paperwork, light intake. Keep a schedule." He studied her carefully. "You don't need to rush." "I know, but I need to feel like myself again." He respected that, respected her more for saying it out loud. "Let me know what you need. I'll help however I can." Maya dried her hands. "You keep saying that." "Because I mean it." She looked at him, eyes narrowing just slightly. "You're used to solving things, aren't you? Just fixing them. That's my job. But this isn't a project." "I know." She stepped away from the sink, her voice softer. "You can't build a family like a business model." "I'm not trying to." Her arms crossed, more from thought than defensiveness. "I believe that you care. I just don't know if you understand what it costs. Not just money, but time, emotion, space. I'm learning." Maya hesitated, then walked past him into the hallway where the boys were putting on shoes ready to go outside. He watched her go, the back of her flannel shirt rising and falling with her breath. She was right. This wasn't a project. It was a life. One that was already tangling with his in ways he hadn't planned for. That afternoon they visited the museum. Maya had suggested it. Something free, educational, normal. Grant had arranged for passes, even called ahead to avoid lines. But once they arrived, he made a conscious choice to hang back, to just let it unfold. The boys darted from exhibit to exhibit. Dinosaurs, deep sea, outer space. Eli asked 100 questions, and Micah tried to touch everything labeled "Do Not Touch." Grant and Maya trailed behind, just far enough to give the boys space, just close enough to feel like they belonged. At one point, they paused in front of a massive projection of the solar system. Planets hovered mid-air in perfect orbit, slow and silent. "Jonah loved this room," Grant said quietly. Maya turned to him. "We used to come here on rainy days. He'd sit under Saturn and tell me he wanted to build a spaceship one day. Said the stars were just waiting for him." She looked at the ringed planet above them. "You never talk about him. I used to think silence meant I was honoring him. And now? Now I think it just kept me stuck." He stepped closer. "You're not the only one who's learning how to start again." Maya's hand brushed his briefly. Just a touch. A pause. And then they turned back toward the boys, who were arguing over whether Jupiter could swallow Earth whole. That night, after dinner, Maya tucked the boys into bed in the guest suite while Grant finished cleaning the kitchen. When she returned to the hallway, she found him standing outside the locked door again. His hand rested on the knob, unmoving. She didn't speak. Instead, she stepped beside him and slid to the floor, her back against the wall. He looked down at her, surprised. "I'm not going to ask what's in there," she said. "I figured you were curious." "I am, but I won't ask." He sat beside her slowly, the cool of the hallway grounding them. "You ever want to open it?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said, "and sometimes I think if I do, I'll lose whatever strength I have left." She leaned her head back against the wall. "It's just a room, Grant." He stared at the door. "Number?" "It's more than that." "Then maybe it's time to find out what's on the other side of more." They sat in silence. Not pushing, not rushing, just breathing together, in the quiet of a house that finally felt alive. Evening spilled into the house in shades of amber and soft gray, the kind of light that makes everything feel paused, like time itself is holding its breath. The scent of something roasting drifted from the kitchen, and faint laughter echoed from upstairs, Eli and Micah in a heated debate over who could name more state capitals. Grant stood in the doorway of Jonah's room, leaning lightly against the frame. The room was no longer frozen in time. It was still his son's, untouched in all the meaningful ways. But now there were small signs of the present threading through the past. A folded blanket on the chair, a new book on the nightstand. The room hadn't changed, but its silence had. He stepped inside. The telescope stood by the window, slightly tilted, like someone had nudged it accidentally and never corrected the angle. Grant reached out, adjusted it slowly, then looked through the lens. The moon was sharp tonight, clear, too bright to ignore. Behind him he heard her. "I didn't mean to interrupt." Maya stood at the door, her hand resting gently on the frame where his had been. Her voice was soft, careful. "You're not," Grant said, straightening. "I can come back. Number stay." She entered the room slowly, eyes scanning the posters, the drawings still taped unevenly to the wall, the shelf filled with small models. Planets, rockets, books too advanced for a 10-year-old but clearly well-loved. "It's not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Something sadder, colder. But this room feels like he just stepped out to get a snack." Grant nodded, swallowing back the lump forming in his throat. "That's how I kept it. Like he might come back. Like I couldn't let it be a goodbye." Maya walked over to the desk and picked up a drawing. It was faded, the pencil lines smudged at the corners. A spaceship, hand-sketched, with a little figure standing at the helm. He wanted to be an astronaut? Or an inventor. It changed weekly. He wanted to see things no one else had seen. He would have loved Eli and Micah. Grant smiled faintly. He probably would have tried to boss them around. She looked over her shoulder, her expression shifting, warm, but laced with something heavier. Do you ever wonder what he'd think of all this? All the time. Does it feel like betrayal to let us in? Grant took a long breath. It did, for a while. But then I realized something. Holding on to grief like it's sacred doesn't honor him. Living fully does. Letting joy back in, that's what he would have wanted. Maya set the drawing down gently. You're a good father. You're a good mother. I'm just trying not to fall apart. You're not falling. You're rebuilding. There was a quiet stretch, the kind that didn't beg to be filled, just shared. Maya moved to the window beside him, folding her arms across her chest as she looked out. Do you ever think, maybe this, us, it's all just a bubble? That one day it'll pop, and we'll realize we imagined something that was never really real? Grant turned to her. Every day. She looked at him, startled by the honesty. But I also think, he continued, that not everything temporary is imaginary. Some things are fragile, yes, but that doesn't mean they're fake. Sometimes fragile things are the most real. Maya's voice dropped to a whisper. And what if I want more than a bubble? Then we find a way to build something stronger. She didn't reply. Her eyes welled, but no tears fell. Instead, she turned her face back to the telescope, as if grounding herself with the stars. I brought something, she said after a beat. She pulled a small notebook from her back pocket, her sketch journal, the one she kept close but never showed anyone. She flipped to the middle and handed it to him. It was a sketch of the boys, Eli laughing, Micah mid-sentence, sitting in Jonah's room, surrounded by books and toy rockets, and next to them, Grant. Kneeling between them, a quiet smile on his face. There were no words, but the emotion was etched in every pencil stroke. Grant stared at the drawing for a long moment. His voice, when it came, was rough. Why did you draw this? Because I wanted to remember it, just in case it doesn't last. He met her gaze, steady. I don't want this to be something we remember. I want it to be something we keep. Maya's hand drifted toward his, uncertain. He reached for it before she could pull away. I'm not offering you a perfect life, he said. Just a real one. One with messes, and mornings when the toast burns, and hard talks about bills and school lunches. But it's yours if you want it. She looked down at their hands, then back up. I do, she whispered. I want that. He stepped closer, their foreheads almost touching. Not quite, not yet. Outside the window, the moon glowed like it was holding its breath too. And for the first time in years, Grant felt like the house wasn't just full, it was whole. A warm breeze rolled in through the open patio doors as the late afternoon sun draped golden light across the kitchen floor. The scent of lemon and basil drifted in the air. Maya's doing. She was humming again, a soft, almost unconscious tune that floated through the house, weaving itself into the fabric of their new, strange rhythm. Grant stood at the far counter, slicing bread with deliberate focus, but his eyes kept flicking to her, how she moved with ease now, barefoot, hair pinned back with one of Mrs. Winter's old clips. How she fit in here without forcing it. It scared him a little, how natural it had become. She glanced over her shoulder and caught him looking. You're staring again. He didn't look away. Can you blame me? She rolled her eyes, but he caught the hint of a smile tugging at her lips. I'm just making pasta. It's more than that. Before she could answer, the front door opened. Mr. Whitaker? Helen's voice echoed through the foyer. Grant froze for a half-second before setting the knife down. "In here." Helen entered the kitchen, her usual sharp presence softened only slightly by the scent of food and the low hum of comfort that filled the room. She took it all in. The woman stirring a pot on the stove, the kids' drawings on the fridge, the opened coloring book on the table. Her eyes lingered on Maya for a second too long. "I came to drop off the documents from the board meeting," she said, setting the folder on the counter. "I didn't realize you had company." Maya turned, polite but firm. "Hi, I'm Maya." Helen nodded, extending a hand. "Helen Tran, Grant's assistant." There was a pause, not unfriendly, but not warm either. Grant stepped in. "Maya's staying here with her boys, for now." Helen's brows rose slightly. "I gathered." Maya stirred the pot again, choosing silence. Helen turned to Grant. "The board is asking questions." "Let them," he said. "They're concerned about image, about optics, about where your priorities are." "I'm not a scandal, am I?" Maya's voice was calm, but the edge was unmistakable. Helen turned back, measured. "Of course not. But this situation is unconventional. There's press coming next week for the new product launch. They're going to ask questions." "Then I'll answer them," Grant said, voice cool. Helen hesitated. "You're making choices that don't align with the version of you they expect." "I'm not that version anymore." Silence pulsed in the room. Maya wiped her hands on a towel and stepped outside, leaving the sliding door half open behind her. Helen watched her go. "She's strong. She's been through hell. I just hope you're not offering her a lifeline that you'll yank back later." Grant met her eyes. "I'm not." Helen picked up her bag. "Then make sure everyone knows that." After she left, Grant found Maya in the garden, kneeling beside the planter beds with dirt on her hands. Her back was to him, but her shoulders were tight, posture stiff. He walked slowly, quietly. "She thinks I'm temporary," Maya said without turning. "She doesn't know you." "She doesn't need to. It's written all over her face. I'm the project, the disruption, the thing that doesn't belong." Grant sat on the edge of the stone border. "You're not a disruption." Maya stood, brushing soil from her fingers. "I've been one my whole life, Grant. I didn't grow up with silver spoons and private schools. I grew up with corners you had to sleep in and parents who worked until their bodies gave out. I'm not asking you to change who you are." Maybe not out loud. That hit him harder than it should have. He exhaled. "Do you think I'm playing some kind of role here? I think you've lived in a world where everything can be managed, even emotions, where mistakes are cleaned up behind boardroom doors, where people leave when it gets complicated." He stood now, face level with hers. "I stayed. I'm still here. For now." He flinched. Maya shook her head, eyes softening. "I'm not pushing you away, I've learned that kindness sometimes comes with an expiration date." "You think I'm being kind?" She paused. "Number, I think you're being real, which makes this scarier." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away, not harshly, but with quiet strength. "I need to stand on my own, Grant. Not because I don't want you, but because if this becomes real, I need to know I'm choosing it, not depending on it." He nodded slowly. "And I need to know I'm not just filling a void." They stood in the garden, the light fading around them. Inside, laughter rang out, Eli and Micah arguing about who got the last breadstick. Maya looked toward the house. "They love you." "I love them." Her eyes found his again. "And me?" The question hung there, naked and brave. "I don't know how to say it yet," he admitted. "But yes, somewhere inside all this, it's happening." She nodded. "Then let's not rush the ending. Let's see if the middle can hold." That night, Grant stood in Jonah's room. He touched the telescope, straightened the corner of a photo, pulled the chair out and sat. Not to mourn, but to remember, to make space for something new. The smell of rain still lingered in the air, soaked into the garden soil and curling beneath the doors. By morning, the sun had pushed through the clouds, casting soft light through every room of the house like a quiet permission to begin again. Grant stood by the kitchen window, sipping coffee, watching Eli and Micah chase each other barefoot across the yard. Their laughter echoed through the open patio, bright and untamed. He didn't move to stop them, not today. It was one of those rare moments where life didn't need correcting. Behind him, Maya entered quietly, hair wet from a shower, wrapped in a cardigan she hadn't unpacked in years. She didn't say anything, just leaned against the counter, looking out the same window, her presence folding into his like it belonged there. "They're getting louder," she said softly. "They're getting comfortable," he replied. "That's not the same thing." "No," he agreed, "but it's a start." She reached for a mug, poured herself coffee, and sat across from him at the island. Her movements were slower this morning, more deliberate, thoughtful. "I had a dream last night," she said, looking into her cup. "I was back in that old apartment. The heater wasn't working. The lights kept flickering. I was trying to get the boys dressed for school, but every time I found one shoe, the other disappeared." He said nothing, just let her speak. "When I woke up, I didn't feel afraid," she continued. "I felt guilty, like I'd let myself get too comfortable here, like maybe I forgot what it feels like to need something." "You haven't forgotten," he said. "You're just healing." Maya smiled, small and tired. "I think I'm scared of wanting more." Grant leaned in slightly. "Wanting more isn't weakness. It is when you're used to less." Their eyes met and something flickered between them, familiar now but still charged with weight. Before either could speak again, a knock came at the front door. Mrs. Winters passed by with a folded towel and called out, "I'll get it." Grant stood anyway, following her. When he reached the door, Pastor Nate stood on the porch, hands clasped, smile as steady as ever beneath his graying beard. "Nate," Grant said, surprised. "Didn't expect you." "Figured I'd check in on a certain someone," Nate replied, stepping inside. "Mrs. Kemp called me. Said there's a lot of light coming from your windows lately. Said it looked like a house remembering how to be a home." Grant chuckled. She's not wrong. Maya emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. When she saw Nate, her shoulders relaxed. "Pastor?" she said warmly. "It's been a while." He smiled wide. "Still making the best lemon pound cake on the east side?" She grinned. "That's never changed." They sat in the living room, the three of them. Grant listened more than he talked, which Nate noticed but didn't press. He had a way of letting silence stretch without letting it feel uncomfortable. Eventually, Nate turned to Grant. "This house of yours, it feels different." "It is. I remember the last time I stood here. Jonah had just passed. You didn't say 10 words to me." Grant looked down. "I didn't have any left to say. And now? I'm trying to find the ones that matter." Nate nodded slowly. "Pain has a funny way of silencing us. But love, real love, has a way of loosening the tongue." Maya watched the exchange quietly, her hands folded in her lap, her knuckles pale. Nate turned to her. "And how are you holding up, Maya?" She hesitated. "I think I'm learning how to be still. Not just survive. That's new." He smiled. "Stillness is sacred, and so is belonging." As the sun shifted higher, casting new shadows across the hardwood floor, Nate stood to leave. "You know," he said, pausing at the door, Sometimes God doesn't open new doors. Sometimes He waits for us to open the ones we locked ourselves. Grant didn't answer, but the weight of those words stayed with him long after Nate drove away. That evening, the house buzzed with low energy. The boys were building a fort in the living room using every couch cushion and blanket they could find. Maya helped them anchor the roof, laughing when Micah tripped over a throw pillow. Grant watched from the archway, hands in his pockets, the scene soft and golden. It didn't look temporary. It looked lived in. After the boys were tucked in, too tired to protest for once, Grant found Maya sitting in the library, sketchbook open in her lap. The telescope beside her glowed faintly in the moonlight. He entered quietly, sat beside her. She didn't speak at first, just drew a slow line across the page. It was a family sketch, 3 figures under a tree. The boys, her. A space left open next to them. "You're not finished," he said. "Not yet." He reached out, gently touched the edge of the page. "You left room." She looked at him, then down again. "Maybe I was waiting." "For what?" "For you to decide whether you still live in a house full of ghosts, or if you're ready to live in a home full of us." Grant's voice caught. "I think I'm tired of talking to shadows." "Then stop." They sat like that for a long while, and then, without drama or build-up, he reached over and took her hand. Just once. Just enough. Her fingers curled into his, not out of need, but out of choice. And for the first time, it didn't feel like holding on. It felt like reaching forward. The sky turned heavy that afternoon, clouds thick and gray, as if the world itself had paused to brace for something. The boys had gone quiet after lunch, their usual chatter replaced with whispers and half-hearted games in the living room. Maya had mentioned feeling lightheaded earlier, brushing it off with a wave of her hand. But now she was sitting on the couch, one arm draped across her lap, the other pressed to her forehead, motionless. Grant noticed the shift before she said a word. "Maya?" he asked, crossing the room. She didn't answer. He crouched in front of her, searching her face. Her eyes were open but distant, like she was trying to focus through fog. "I'm fine," she murmured. "You're not," he said softly. She started to sit up straighter, but the effort made her wince. Her breathing shallowed. Her skin had gone pale, lips tinged with gray. Grant didn't panic. He didn't raise his voice. He reached gently for her hand. "You're okay. I've got you." The boys had stopped pretending not to watch. Eli took a step forward. "Is she sick again?" "Yes," Grant said carefully. "But we're going to help her, just like before." Micah's chin trembled. "She said she felt better." "I know." Grant stood, pulling out his phone. "She didn't want to worry you." As he dialed the clinic, Maya weakly tugged at his sleeve. I don't want another hospital night." "We'll go to the clinic," he said. "You trust me?" Her fingers tightened slightly in response. That was enough. In less than 15 minutes, they were in the car. Maya reclined in the passenger seat, bundled in a blanket. The boys sat in the back, unusually still. Grant drove without speaking, one hand gripping the wheel, the other resting near Maya's, brushing her knuckles whenever the car slowed. Inside the clinic, everything moved quickly. A nurse recognized Maya instantly and ushered her to an exam room. The boys waited in the hallway, pressed close together. Grant stood behind them, pacing, every step measured, but burning. After what felt like hours, Tina Alvarez appeared. She looked tired, clipboard tucked under one arm, glasses pushed up into her hair. "She had a drop in blood pressure," she said. "Her body's overwhelmed. The progress she made, it's still real. But this is a setback." "Is she stable?" Grant asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, but she needs rest, monitoring, a proper recovery plan." He glanced toward the door. "Can I see her?" Tina nodded. But just you. The boys should stay out here for now. Inside the room, Maya lay on the bed, the color slowly returning to her cheeks. Her eyes flicked up as he entered. You stayed. I always will. She managed a tired smile. You say that like it's easy. It's not. He pulled a chair beside her. But you make it worth it. Her fingers curled toward his, slow and weak. I was scared. I know. I still am. He leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Then we'll be scared together. She let the silence settle, blinking slow like her body was finally giving in to rest. You should take the boys home, she whispered. They shouldn't see me like this. They need to see what real strength looks like. Grant. I mean it. You don't have to be perfect, just present. She turned her head to the side, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. I want to stay, she said. With you. With them. I want the whole thing. You have it, he whispered. You've had it since the park. A long pause. I'm not used to being chosen, she said. He pressed her hand gently. Then get used to it. Outside the room, the boys sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by drawings and crayons Tina had handed them to pass the time. Grant knelt beside them. Your mom's going to be okay, he said. Eli looked up. You sure? I'm sure. Micah's eyes narrowed. You're not just saying that to make us feel better? Grant smiled. Number, I'd never lie to you. The boys nodded slowly. Trust, tentative but real, anchored in that moment. As they left the clinic hours later, the night sky opened with rain. Not cold or cruel, just steady. The kind of rain that softened edges, made everything feel new again. Maya was asleep in the back seat, her head resting gently against the window. The boys dozed beside her, curled into each other like they always had. Grant drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on his thigh, open, waiting for whatever came next. The turning point wasn't loud, it was quiet. It was Maya whispering, I want to stay. It was the boys leaning into him without hesitation. It was the realization that he was no longer rescuing anyone. They were building something. Together. Morning arrived gently. The rain, now a memory, swept into the earth. Sunlight slid across the hardwood floors like a quiet apology for the night before. In the upstairs hallway, the soft creak of floorboards marked the boys waking early again. But this time, their steps were quieter, thoughtful. Grant stood by the kitchen island, brewing coffee, when Maya's voice reached him from behind. They're still whispering. He turned to find her wrapped in one of his sweaters, her feet bare, hair tousled from sleep, but her eyes brighter, steady in a way that felt different. They think if they're too loud, you'll send them back, she said softly, stepping closer. I've never said that. You haven't needed to. Kids remember everything, especially silence. He reached for a mug, poured her coffee, slid it across the counter toward her. Then let's make noise on purpose. She smiled, but there was a tremor behind it. Something held back. Something she hadn't spoken yet. He waited, letting her move at her own pace. I got a call from the clinic, she said finally. They offered me a part-time role, 3 days a week, administrative work and patient check-ins. That's great, Grant said, but his voice held caution. She nodded. It is. I need this. Not just for the money. For myself. He took a step toward her. I want you to have everything that makes you feel whole. I just don't want you to feel like you have to earn your place here. I'm not earning it, she said. I'm claiming it. That stopped him. Grant, you opened the door, you let us in, but if we're going to stay, I can't be a guest in your life. I need to be part of it. You already are. Then let me move through it with my own steps, not just follow yours. Their eyes locked. No defense, No retreat. Just truth. Raw, and maybe even a little painful, but necessary. He exhaled, the tension sliding out of his shoulders. Okay. That afternoon they packed a lunch and drove out to a quiet field behind the museum. It was Maya's idea, a Saturday that didn't cost anything but time. The boys ran ahead, chasing their shadows across the grass. Maya laid out the blanket while Grant carried the basket, glancing occasionally at the horizon like he still wasn't used to the stillness being real. She sat beside him, unpacking sandwiches, handing him a bottle of water. "I forgot what weekends were like," she said. "I forgot how much I missed them." They ate, laughed, shared quiet moments in between the bursts of joy that only children could create. At one point, Eli climbed a low tree, shouted something about spotting Saturn, and Micah threw a grape in protest. Maya watched them, her expression softening. "Do you think we're too different?" she asked suddenly. Grant blinked. "You and me?" She nodded. "Different worlds. Different pasts. You with your boardrooms and 5-year plans. Me with my boys and just trying to make it through the weak instincts." He looked at her for a long moment, then replied, "You ever see two puzzle pieces that don't look like they fit, but when you press them together, they lock in place?" She smiled faintly. "Is that us?" "It could be." They lay back on the blanket as clouds drifted slowly overhead. Maya rested her head on his shoulder, and for the first time he didn't flinch at the weight of another person against him. He leaned into it. Later that evening, after the boys were in bed and the kitchen had been cleared of picnic leftovers, Maya sat at the table, a folder of paperwork in front of her. Grant came in holding 2 mugs of tea. "What's all this?" he asked, setting one beside her. "School forms, health updates, emergency contacts, all the little pieces that say, we're really doing this." He sat across from her, watching as she filled in names, checked boxes. "Maya." She looked up. "I talked to my lawyer." That sentence alone shifted the air. "I want to add the boys to my emergency contact forms, and you if you'll let me. I know we're not married, but I want them protected, no matter what happens. I want it in writing." Maya didn't speak. Her eyes welled, her hands still. "That's not just generosity," she said. "That's permanence. It's a beginning." She reached across the table, took his hand slowly. "I want to build this life with you," she whispered, "but I need to build it piece by piece. With you beside me, not in front of me. I wouldn't want it any other way." Silence settled again. But it wasn't empty. It was full of decisions made without fanfare, full of promises that didn't need to be spoken twice. As the house dimmed around them and the night settled in, Maya leaned her head against his shoulder. "You said once that Jonah used to dream of seeing the stars," she whispered. "He did." She looked up. "Maybe it's time the boys did too." He nodded. "Let's show them the sky." The following Monday felt colder than the forecast had promised, not in temperature, but in tone. Grant sat in the sleek boardroom of Whitaker Innovations, sunlight catching the edges of polished chrome and glass. The room was quiet, except for the subtle shuffling of papers and the occasional cough from across the long table. 12 board members, all waiting, watching. He didn't belong here today. Not because he wasn't prepared, he was, but because his mind had been somewhere else for weeks now. On Maya, on the boys, on the way life had crept back into the halls of his home and refused to leave, and someone had noticed. "Before we begin," one of the older men said, adjusting his tie, "I'd like to address the change in dynamic." Grant looked up slowly. "The dynamic." "Yes." The man glanced down at his papers as if the words would arrange themselves for him. "There have been concerns about your focus, your public image. There's talk, Grant, about a woman, Children. A situation that seems out of character for the company you've built. A few others nodded subtly. Others stayed quiet, their silence just as loud. "I see," Grant said, his voice even. Another board member leaned in, trying to soften the blow. "No one is questioning your leadership, but optics matter. Investors are asking if you've been distracted." Grant paused, looked around the table at people who knew his numbers, his strategies, his market instincts, but not him. He stood slowly. "You know, I've given this company my name, my time, my life. I've sacrificed birthdays, holidays, even funerals to sit in this room and prove my value." The room stayed still. "And yet, the first time I start acting like a human being instead of a machine, you call it a concern." "Grant," the older man began. "No," he said, cutting him off. "Let me say this once. Yes, I've changed. Yes, there's a woman, and 2 kids, and they've shown me more about courage and commitment than any deal we've ever signed." He looked around the room, fire quietly burning beneath his voice. "If our image rests on pretending I don't care about them, then maybe it's not an image worth protecting." The silence that followed wasn't surprised. It was unsettled. Not one person could meet his eyes for long. He adjusted his jacket, nodded. "Now, let's talk projections." Back at the house, Maya was in the kitchen with Mrs. Winters, laughing over a failed attempt at sourdough. The smell of flour and herbs clung to the air, warm and honest. The boys were upstairs, building something with Legos that apparently required an entire section of the hallway. Maya looked at the clock, eyes flicking toward the door. She was nervous. She wouldn't say it, but she was. Grant's meeting had been circled on the calendar for a week, and though she never asked for updates, she listened for the sound of his car every 5 minutes. When the front door finally opened, she straightened without meaning to. Grant stepped in, setting his keys down slowly, his posture unreadable. She met him at the threshold between the kitchen and the foyer. "Well?" she asked. He looked at her, just looked. And then he smiled. "I told them." Her breath caught. "Everything?" "Everything that mattered." "And?" "I don't know if they'll get used to it, but I didn't ask them to." She blinked. "You really said that?" "I told them the truth. About you, about the boys, about how none of this was a distraction. It was the first real focus I've had in years." He stepped closer, brushing a loose curl from her face. "I don't care how long it takes them to understand it, as long as you do." Maya swallowed hard. "You just risked your reputation for us." "No," he said softly. "I rebuilt it." She didn't say anything. She couldn't. Instead, she kissed him, not out of passion, but out of certainty. It was slow, quiet, like saying thank you without the words. The boys came barreling down the stairs moments later, dragging a half-built spaceship behind them, and everything shifted back to normal, chaos and joy, noise and motion. Grant stood there watching them, Maya by his side. "You still sure?" she asked playfully. He nodded, eyes on the twins. "More than ever." Later that night, after the house quieted again, Grant opened his laptop and stared at the screen for a long time. Then he opened a blank document and began typing something he hadn't thought about in years. His will, his contingency plans, a list of names followed by a line that read, "In the event of my absence, full custody and trust allocation to—" He didn't finish the sentence just yet, but he knew exactly how it would end. It was one of those early spring afternoons that felt like it couldn't make up its mind, too warm for jackets, too cool for certainty. The air carried the scent of new blooms and something else underneath. Change. The kind that didn't announce itself with fanfare, but drifted in slowly, settling in the spaces that had once felt unfinished. The backyard had been transformed. Eli and Micah stood barefoot in the grass, grinning up at Maya as she adjusted the collar of Micah's tiny button-down shirt. Grant stood a few feet back, watching them, holding something behind his back. "You two remember what we practiced?" Maya asked, crouching to their level. Eli nodded solemnly. "No running, no burping, no arguing over who's taller." Micah squinted up at her. "What if someone asks if we're twins?" "You are twins," she laughed. "Yeah, but should we say it together or one at a time?" Maya smiled, smoothing down his hair. "Just be yourselves." Grant walked over then, slowly revealing the surprise. A navy blue tie for each of them. Clip-ons, slightly too formal for a garden event, but perfect for the moment. Micah gasped. "Are we going to a wedding?" "Something like that," Grant said. The boys stared up at him, then at Maya. "You're not getting married without us, right?" Eli asked. "Definitely not," Maya said quickly. Grant knelt. "But we are making something official." That evening, just before golden hour painted the yard in honeyed light, close friends and a few neighbors gathered near the back patio. Pastor Nate stood near a small arbor Grant had built with his own hands over the last 2 weekends. White wood, wrapped in soft strands of jasmine and ivy. There were no pews, no programs, just mismatched chairs, laughter, and the low hum of something sacred but simple. Maya stood barefoot in the grass wearing a soft ivory dress, not extravagant, but flowing. Her hair was pinned loosely at the back, a single daisy tucked behind her ear. The boys stood beside her, grinning wide, their tiny clip-on ties slightly askew. Grant approached slowly, wearing his navy suit jacket unbuttoned, no tie. He looked at her like she was the only thing he'd ever been sure about. When he reached her, he stopped, took both her hands. "You ready?" he asked, voice low. "I've never been more terrified," she whispered. "Me too," he said, then smiled. "Perfect." Pastor Nate cleared his throat, chuckling under his breath. "I was going to start with something poetic, but watching these two, I don't think it's necessary." There was light laughter. The boys giggled, one of them already loosening his tie. "Love," Nate said, "isn't always loud. Sometimes it's two people finding their way back to something they didn't know they were missing. It's not about grand gestures, it's about consistent ones. It's about showing up, even when it's hard, especially then." He looked at Maya, then at Grant. "And that's what you've both done, again and again." Grant turned to Maya, eyes wet but steady. "I didn't know how to rebuild after I lost Jonah. I tried to fill the silence with numbers and deadlines. I told myself the world didn't need my heart, just my work. But then I saw your boys in that park, and I saw you in their eyes. Strong, brave, trying even when it hurt. You didn't just walk into my life, you woke it up. And every part of me that had gone quiet found its voice again." Maya's chin trembled. Her voice shook, but she didn't falter. "I spent so long being strong for them, for myself. I thought if I asked for help, I'd lose everything I'd worked to protect. But then you didn't just offer help, you offered a home, not just a house, a place I didn't have to apologize for taking up space. You've never asked me to be anything other than who I am. And that changed everything." Eli tugged at Nate's sleeve, whispering something. Nate chuckled. "Micah has something he'd like to say." Micah stepped forward, pulling a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "We wrote this together," he said proudly, clearing his throat. He unfolded the paper. It was wrinkled, the handwriting jagged and shared between two small hands. "To Mom and Mr. Grant," he began. You are the best because you care about pancakes and you don't yell when we spill stuff, Eli added, reading over his shoulder. You gave us a big house, but more importantly, you gave us a big feeling. It's called safe, Eli said, nodding. Micah smiled. And also, we think this is cool. The crowd laughed and Maya covered her mouth, laughing through tears. When the short ceremony ended, Maya and Grant didn't kiss with fireworks or applause. They kissed like something quiet closing, like the final click of a lock turning after being stuck for too long. Later, inside the house, Grant walked into Jonah's room, now softly changed. Still his son's, but with new life in it. A few of the boys' drawings now hung beside Jonah's. The telescope had been polished, aimed at a different part of the sky. He held up the final surprise to Maya, a small plaque, etched in brass, resting on Jonah's nightstand. It read, "Sometimes the family we builds us right back." Maya rested her head on his shoulder. Neither said a word. They didn't have to. The air was different that morning, softer, brighter, as if the house itself had exhaled. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the kitchen, warming the space where pancakes sizzled on the stove and two boys scrambled to find matching socks. Maya moved between cabinets with practiced ease now, humming to herself, her hair pulled back in a low twist. She looked up to find Grant leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, just watching her like he still couldn't believe any of it was real. "Do you always stare like that?" she teased, flipping a pancake. "Only when I still can't figure out how I got this lucky." She raised an eyebrow, smirking. "You bought a toy airplane in the park. That was your move." "That was the smartest investment I've ever made." Micah ran into the kitchen, waving a crumpled flyer. "Field trip permission slip. We need to turn it in today or we can't go." "Backpack," Maya said. "Checked it twice." He grinned. Grant ruffled his hair as Eli joined him, holding his drawing from the night before. A rocket ship with 4 stick figures standing on the moon. 2 small, 1 tall, 1 with a braid. "This one's going on the fridge," Grant said, taking it. Eli beamed. "I gave us a dog too, just in case." Maya chuckled. "We'll talk about that later." The boys finished breakfast in record time, backpacks slung over shoulders, energy radiating like sunlight itself. Grant drove them to school, windows down, music low, both boys singing off-key in the back seat. When he returned, Maya was in the backyard garden, sleeves rolled up, fingers in the soil. He watched her from the patio, the breeze catching loose strands of her hair, the late morning light kissing her skin. He stepped down onto the grass, crouched beside her, letting the silence sit for a while before he spoke. "I finalized the papers," he said quietly. She paused, eyes meeting his. "They're in my will. If anything ever happens to me, they're protected. You're protected." Maya didn't respond right away. She reached over, brushed the dirt from his hand with her thumb. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." She nodded slowly. "So did I." He looked at her, confused, until she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a folded paper. She handed it to him. It was an adoption application. His name filled the guardian field. So did hers. He blinked, his throat tightening. "Are you sure?" "They already call you Dad." Grant lowered his eyes to the form again, overwhelmed. "They do." She reached for his hand. "So let's make it official." The breeze moved around them, lifting the moment, stretching it. There was no music, no celebration. Just 2 people kneeling in the dirt, choosing each other all over again. That night, after dinner and homework and one very dramatic Lego disaster, the house was still. Grant sat beside Maya on the couch, both of them holding mugs of tea, the television on but muted. "You know what I think about sometimes?" she asked, her voice just above a whisper. "What?" That day in the park. You could have walked by, you almost did. He leaned back, exhaling softly. Sometimes I think about that too. And? I didn't. She smiled gently, eyes shining. Number you didn't. He kissed her then, slow and steady, like the kind of promise that doesn't need an audience. The boys were asleep upstairs. The stars were out. The toy airplane still sat on the mantel, its chipped red wings a reminder that love doesn't always come wrapped in perfection. Sometimes it shows up cracked, weathered, unexpected, but exactly right. They hadn't just built a life. They'd rebuilt a future, one brick at a time, one heart at a time. And it all began with a sign. Selling toys to buy medicine for Mom. Some stories start small, but this one never really ended.